Hello everyone and welcome to the pre-flop section of the course. I imagine for some of you, you will have solver generated pre-flop ranges for 6 max already, and you might want to skip this section, but I'd recommend at least skimming through at a fast speed. There's going to be some talk about exploitative play, a little bit of discussion on future work that you might want to do to improve how you play pre-flop, and also just a few things that you want to watch out for, like mistakes that you can easily fall into doing if you're using solver generated preflop ranges and just kind of blindly going ahead and using those without much thought. So hopefully there'll be some useful stuff in there for everyone. Those of you who don't currently have preflop solver ranges for 6 max, then I think these normally cost hundreds of dollars to buy. So with the course just costing 1k, guys, hopefully this is some good value for you already just in this short section. So yeah, I hope you guys will enjoy the section. I'm going to be using Monka Viewer to show off the ranges. The ranges were made on Monka Solver by someone else. I just bought them, and I'll show you quickly how this works. So on the left hand side here, we can see these are 100 big blind ranges, and you have then opening ranges for each position here. So you have under the gun, you have under the gun +1, cutoff, button, and small blind. And essentially what's happening here is that each of these is assuming that everyone folds to this person, and then it's their opening range. And if you were to then click on, say, under the gun open, now each of these assumes that everyone folds until then. So if we look at the big blind here, it assumes that hijack through small blind have all folded, and then this is the range that you should play in the big blind, given that's happened. Note also, it's probably obvious, but the orange is raise or 3-bet here, and the yellow is call, and the white is fold. So worth saying as well that the rake that I've used for these ranges, or should I say the person who made them, the rake they used is 4% with a maximum of 0.3 big blinds. So if you're playing high stakes and the rake is capped at a lower amount than that, then you need to just play a little bit looser than these suggest. Or if you're playing like by the hour, then play a little bit looser. Rake by the hour in live games, for example. If you're playing games with very high rake, you need to play a little bit tighter. Wouldn't go too wild with it. It doesn't make a huge difference, but it will be noticeable, so just adjust accordingly. But I kind of figured for this course I'm going to have people playing all sorts of different games, so just use some random rake. Doesn't really matter too much, and then you guys can adjust from there. So Monka solver and solvers in general, something that's very important to understand is that Monka solver has not solved 6 max no limit hold'em, and nothing will for quite some time. It's an extremely complicated game with just a huge number of different options and all sorts of different branches of the tree. Monka solver uses abstractions, it limits the number of bet sizes, buckets hands together, all sorts of tricks to kind of come to a solution, which is, good and definitely worth studying, but not perfect. And you really need to understand that if you're going to not just use these ranges effectively now, but also not get left behind in the future when better things come out and ranges improve. I'm also going to show you just how inaccurate it can be in rarer spots, mainly out of interest. But look at the 200 big blinds is kind of exponentially more difficult to solve than 100 big blinds. The game tree is just much bigger because you've just got these extra sort of layers on top that extra betting options. If you bet a certain size and then the same size again and so on, you'll get all in at a later time with 200 big blinds than 100 big blinds. That makes the game tree a lot bigger. So looking at a complex spot here and a complex rare spot, if we've got under the gun opening, hijack 3 betting, cutoff 4 betting, button 5 betting, and small blind shoving. So this is not going to happen probably ever in your poker career, but maybe one time if you're lucky, or two maybe if you're very lucky. Now look at how it wants the big blind to play. You can see it's calling hands like king 5 suited, king 3 suited, 6-4 suited sometimes, which is crazy, right? Why would it do that? And it's because this spot is so rare, it just hasn't bothered with it, essentially. If you think in your entire career, you're almost certainly never going to be in the spot with king 5 suited, and even if you were, you're still folding it most of the time. Like, this is just totally irrelevant to the solver. Even though it knows the EV here is -1 big blind of folding, you just lose your big blinds, and it's -163 big blinds if you call, it's still doing it sometimes just because it's not converged here at all. So even though you've got terrible EV in this like tiny section of the game that's almost never going to be reached, when you take that back to the roots of the game tree, the effect on it is it's just totally negligible. It's totally irrelevant what you do in the spot because it happens so rarely. It's going to make no difference to your overall EV as a poker player, how you play the spot. Yes, you get these weird things in solvers that a human would never do. In fact, if you're in this spot and or someone else is in this spot and you see them call with king 5 suited here, you know they're a bot, because even a beginner is not going to make this mistake as a human player. But so solvers will tell you excellent results in very common spots, and the results will get less and less reliable as you get towards rarer spots. And we'll see that to a lesser extent with some of those sort of cold 4-bet type situations as you get to rarer things. Not as crazy as this, but the EVs will still not quite be as clear cut as, for example, opening, where these hands that you're mixing strategy with, it's very close in EV between folding and raising, and then that's why it's mixing the strategy. It is important to note, though, that even with normal spots, these common spots, they're still based on the abstraction on which the solver runs. So what that means is, imagine you've got a spot like button versus big blind, and in order to solve this and give you any solution at all, it's assumed that the button only has one size in every spot post-flop. And button will often want to use a different size to that size, but it's not able to. So it's going to be less inclined to play hands pre-flop because it's not able to do what it wants to post-flop. So it's losing EV post-flop if it plays it, which makes fold more attractive than raise with a hand that's close. And balancing that, though, you do have that the big blind will have the same problem in the solution that the solvers come up with. So overall, it will kind of balance out okay. And these solutions should be pretty solid. But it's important to bear that in mind, because as programs get better and they get more accurate, better ranges will come along. Don't think that these are perfect ranges. And something that's also important to bear in mind thinking about that is that when you have an opponent who is a good player and is not playing how you think they should based on these ranges, it's very tempting to think like, oh, this person just sucks. They don't know what they're doing pre-flop. Just keep in mind that they might have a better program than you. You know, they might even have seen how you play and entered sort of constrained how you play with your sizings and maybe even your ranges into their own solver program, and then come out with how to exploit that. They could have an entire strategy based on the fact that you 4-bet to a certain size, and that affects, you know, how they're 3-betting versus your open and so on. So just bear that in mind, and for most of you, it won't be an issue. If you're playing low mid stakes for the next few years, you're playing live poker, nobody's going to have that much information on you. Nobody's going to be able to spend that much time on analysing your particular game. It might be an issue, say, at mid stakes, if there's a bunch of people using the same ranges and someone might, you know, work out how to exploit that set of ranges and realise that you fall into the group that's playing those ranges. But for the most part, it's a non-issue. But if you're playing high stakes, and particularly if you're playing, say, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, there's going to be all sorts of bots out there and programs that are capable of exploiting sort of small or maybe even decent mistakes that are brought on by the abstractions of the solver that you've used to get ranges like this today. So how should you go about using these ranges? So the easiest option, or the most obvious option, is obviously to have something like this open while you play. But that's not ideal for a couple of reasons. The first is that it's just somewhat difficult. I mean, if you're playing 4 tables and you're having to click through, like, okay, so there's an open, and then there's a fold, and then they folded, and then this guy, and so on. It's just going to take you time, and all of that time is going to reduce the number of tables you can play. It's going to stop you from focusing on difficult post-flop decisions, which might have a very high EV differential between 2 different options, whereas most close decisions, for like whether you're opening a certain hand or 3-betting a certain hand, it's not going to be a big difference in EV between the 2 options. So ideally, you want to study the ranges, test yourself, maybe play against some sort of solver, and just like keep playing the same spot until you get comfortable with the ranges. And that's probably a better use of your time than sort of spending all your time, unless you've got a very easy way to display it, better than like spending all your time with these pre-flop ranges open while you're playing. Another potential issue, of course, is that I imagine this is against site terms and conditions to have something like this open while you play. I don't know for most sites. Maybe it's just standard these days. I imagine on PokerStars it's against the rules. Whether or not they enforce it, I don't know. But you don't want to risk getting your balance confiscated and getting banned or something. So just be aware of that and be careful. And yeah, if you're playing live, particularly, obviously you're not going to carry like a book full of charts around with you. Maybe some people might, but you're probably going to want to just get some practice in and get a rough idea of how everything should be, and then just keep testing yourself, keep checking. If you play online, check Holder Manager, check Poker Tracker, make sure you're playing well in all these different spots. So yeah, I think that's about it for the introduction, but I hope you guys enjoy this section, and I'm going to start off by talking about opening ranges in the next video.